Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Connie Wen. I'm the co-founder of AAPI Women Lead, and I'm so excited to bring you this conversation today. For AAPI Heritage Month, we want to take some time to celebrate and amplify the women in our community, boldly telling our stories through their art. In partnership with HBOMax, AAPI Women Lead is excited to bring you this timely discussion called Through Our Lens, with amazing Asian American and Pacific Islander women in art and photography to discuss the intersections of their craft, activism, and AAPI identity. Through their work and all of our visions, we are working to create a different world. To help us lead and moderate this conversation, we have the one and only Suchin Pak. Suchin Pak is a veteran journalist who has been hosting and reporting the news for almost 30 years. You may be most familiar with her work on MTV. Currently, she co-hosts a brand new podcast called Add to Cart about the things we consume and what they say about who we are. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Suchin.
Thank you, Dr. Connie. And thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm so happy to be with this group because today we are talking about inspiration, creativity, and passion. We have such a diverse group of accomplished photographers here with us today. So let me do some quick intros. Lukita Maxwell has been on the stage and the small screen since she was very young. You can now see her in HBO Max's critically acclaimed series Generation. And when she's not acting, Lukita has a deep passion for photography, art, and design. She's an editor and web designer for Sunstroke, a Gen zine run by and for artists and activists. Welcome. Hannah Yoon is a Korean-Canadian photographer based in Philadelphia. Her background is in photojournalism and documentary photography. Hannah is founding board member of the Authority Collective, whose mission is to push for more equity and diversity in the photo industry. Welcome. Simra Farouk is an American Pakistani photographer who primarily focuses on the South Asian community, and her work dives into the realities and dreams of South Asians. We're going to get into that. Femininity and kinship. Cindy Trin is a photographer, visual journalist, organizer, and activist who's passionate about social justice and human rights. She's the creator of Activist NYC, a documentary photo project about activism and social justice movements in New York City. Longia Toy is a queer photographer of Samoan and Takaloan descent. She has dedicated her time documenting social movements throughout Northern California and uses her photography to draw attention to inequities that impact marginalized communities. Just because we're here celebrating, API Heritage Month, I want to go around and ask everyone how your cultural background has influenced the way that you either approach your work or creativity, and how that it has really informed you as a creative person. And maybe I'll start with Lakita.
Yeah, I grew up in Indonesia as a mixed kid and then moved to the States as a mixed kid. So I've always experienced a very biracial upbringing where I didn't really necessarily felt like I ever fit in. And so I think that in my coming of age where I am right now at 19, kind of doing this show Generation, a show that celebrates diversity, I've been starting to kind of appreciate and learn more about my my culture on both sides, and celebrate that. And also with my work with Sunstroke, I'm in the process of finding what my cultural identity means to me, and I am just so honored to be among so many beautiful AAPI women's faces here.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned it too. I think that there is such a large group of this generation which doesn't belong to one culture or one tree. They've grown up, almost in this, whether it's a global culture or a third culture. So I think it is a really interesting time to talk about identity in that way. So thank you, Lakita. I'll go to you next, Hannah.
When I think about cultural background, I do think about not only like growing up as a daughter of Korean immigrants, I think about, my parents also being, they were missionaries from South Korea to Canada. So there's like another layer. And then there's the other layer of growing up in like a really small town without many other like Koreans or other Asians. And then also growing up in Canada, which I think is another cultural influence on the way I approach work. So I think for me, I think I bring a lot of curiosity and questions to the photo work that I do, or anything that I'm trying to explore, even if it's not photography. I feel like I'm even like, especially recently, I'm using questions, I think, to guide me. Because growing up, I questioned a lot of like, okay, my parents are immigrants, but they're also missionaries. We were, we did go to Korean language classes, but we weren't like, it wasn't enforced either. So I felt like there was a lot of mixed messages that were, given to us. So I think it's a lot of exploration, interrogating, questioning that I bring with me when I do my work.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way. I think in all whether you're writing or taking pictures, I always think starting off with a question is like the most natural place to be. So that makes a lot of sense. Cindy, I don't know. I've asked the biggest question of all. I promise the other questions are going to be less grand. But how has sort of your background and your heritage, how has it informed you as a photographer, or even the choices that you make as a creative person?
It definitely has influenced my work and my life in every aspect of the way, because my mom is actually a Vietnamese refugee. She came to America after the Vietnam War, after the fall of Saigon. So her experience is actually not just of an immigrant, it's of a refugee. And refugees didn't really have a choice, right? They came to this country because they had to flee war. They had to flee poverty. They had to flee violence. And my mom, coming from that trauma and that background, coming to America was a very difficult, move, because she didn't want to come here. She had to survive. And so she came to this country with nothing, with no money, no education, no learning of the language. She didn't know English at all. She had to learn English, a whole new language, all at once, while figuring out like how to build a family, how to build a life in this country. So when she had my brother and I, she's a single mom because my parents got divorced when I was really young. So she was a single mom raising two kids, in Southern California. And I think that experience to this day is what makes me who I am. I'm a daughter of a Vietnamese refugee. I'm a daughter of someone who came to this country and had to learn how to survive. And I think that's a big theme of what we are going through right now as AAPI folks in this country, is learning how to survive in a place that never really wanted us to begin with, learning to adapt to a place that is hostile to us, who sees us as foreign, who sees us as enemies. And I think that's what the AAPI struggle has been for generations, right? So with my mom's, the moment my mom came to this country and the moment I was born in this country, I had to struggle a lot my whole life with, figuring out, am I Asian enough? Am I American enough? And like battling those two dual identities of being Asian and American. So it really impacts the way that like I go about my work. It impacts the themes that I explore in my work, the kind of groups and marginalized folks that I want to uplift in my work and to feature. These are the kinds of things I really think about all the time when I'm out photographing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. Longdi, I'll go to you. How has your background shaped you as a photographer?
As a Samoan and Tokelauan woman, there's much of our history that has been kind of, I would say, undiscovered or untold due to colonialization. But with what Luke said, I resonate with this trying to find my identity. I was born and raised in the States, in America. And there is this kind of barrier of like, am I Samoan and Tokelauan enough, or am I not? And that's always been a place where I've just kind of been like, I don't know where I belong. And now that I'm older and really getting involved in activism and really trying to know about other cultures, it's also inspired me to know much more about mine and dig deeper, because there's much of histories of so many indigenous and different cultures that have been just kind of swept under the rug and due to white supremacy, essentially. And so this has affected my work in so many ways, where I'm like inspired to bring light to not just my culture and get to know it, but also in other cultures, and especially with AAPI. A lot of my cultural upbringing of what I do know is that it is rooted in family and spirituality and love. And so in doing my work and attending these rallies and marches, that is exactly what I carry with me going into those healing spaces. And it allows me to really keep an open mind and capture raw, powerful moments.
I love that, you bring up such a good point, and why all of your faces, why each and every one of your voices is so important to this conversation, and why I think HBOMax has brought these women together. And we have said time and time again, to be Asian American, it's such a strange definition. I think we're always defining that for ourselves, and we are not a monolith. I mean, the Asian diaspora is just so vast, both in ethnicity and culture and socioeconomic, background. So I just think it's great that we have such a representation. And so, Simra, I wanted to ask you sort of a similar question of, how does your cultural background and your Asian Americanness affect your work and the way that you see the world?
Yeah, I think similar to everyone else, it's kind of like growing up here in America, you're far away from the country of origin, like wherever your family's from. So there's kind of like a big distance, not physically, but also like your relationship to your culture. So you kind of have to dig deeper and do that extra research and asking questions and like finding answers and exploring. And I also think that what I showcase in my work is like both the beautiful side of the culture and then also the not so beautiful side. And I think that just comes from like the experiences that we all have. I really showcase like experiences that me and a bunch of like my friends have gone through, as well as celebratory parts of our culture, because I do think that every culture has its flaws, or toxic traditions. And so that's kind of what it's been like for me.
This past year for all of us, I think, has been such a tumultuous time. And I think, I wake up every day, I want one of those like preschool meters where it's like, I'm happy, I'm sad, and I just don't know. Every day I wake up and I'm like, do I open my feed? Do I get into what's happening? Did something happen last night? And am I ready for this? I have never in my life had these kinds of conversations to the depth of it, even for myself and with our community. And Hannah, you were recently in Atlanta documenting the aftermath of the mass shootings, and you posted something, and you wrote, working and being in Atlanta was liberating for me. I was able to follow my gut, my intuition, and feelings. Tell me about that. Tell me about what led you to sort of post those words.
Yeah, so I was sent there by the Washington Post to cover the aftermath, but not in the typical, I guess, journalist manner or news manner. And I was asked to talk to the community, listen to what they're experiencing, hear their feelings, and use that as a guide to create imagery. And I mean, and that was a huge task, but I also felt like I was given a lot of freedom to also channel my own feelings, thoughts, just even like use it as a way to process like what had happened and what has been happening across the country. And so in some ways it felt like it was like a cathartic experience to work for a national outlet, to have people trust me with what they're experiencing and to translate that into images. I felt like that was really empowering for me as like a creator, and to not appease to like the white gaze. It made me think a lot about what Lee Isaac Chung said, the director for Minari. He said in a New York Times Magazine article something about, I don't want to have to explain my, and I wanted to do that too. Like, I don't want to have to keep using my work to explain something about me or what my community is going through. So what was liberating about it too was I was doing the work for other Asian Americans, for other Korean Americans, for others who just really felt deeply with what had happened in Atlanta.
I'm going to go to Cindy next, because I think in a lot of ways, both of you guys have a similarity about using this medium as a way to really give us a lens into what we're feeling in the moment as well. We had a beloved elder and heroic photographer, Corky Lee, pass this year. And, he used his camera as a weapon against injustice. Cindy, I know that you resonate very deeply with that sentiment and the way that he used his work. Can you talk a bit about that, especially in the light of this past year, both the highs and lows, because we've had these incredible, Hannah, you just mentioned Minari, and Nomadland, and just these accolades, right? And then you have it juxtaposed with such grief and sadness and violence. Cindy, can you speak a bit to that in this moment in time?
Corky Lee was a mentor to me, and when I first started documenting protests and activism in New York, I looked to him because he was one of the only Asian American activist photographers. And he often said, like, he thought of his camera as a weapon against injustice. And I resonate with that because I also feel that when I'm out there with my camera at these protests, like really in these protests too, just like not like observing, I'm in these protests, I'm participating in these protests. I don't think of myself ever as press, because I am myself there in the protest as well. So when I think about those words that Corky has said to me, for years now, I often think about how, through my work, I want to showcase not only the issues that are important to us as Asian Americans, as BIPOC, as LGBTQIA people, as just humans, right? Like anyone that has any kind of empathy for others, people who have been struggling, who have been suffering, who are dying right now. These issues need to be heard. They need to be talked about. We need to have representation of these issues. And through my Activist NYC project, I've really tried to highlight and showcase the diversity of the people who go out to protest. These are not just people with no jobs, right? These are people who come from so many different backgrounds, so many different cultures, so many different religions, and they're showing up for causes that they care about, that they're passionate about, that they want to fight for. A lot of these folks, they put their bodies on the line just to fight for these causes. And I get messages from people around the world, even like mostly in the country, but even around the world, I get messages from people saying, wow, love to see New York showing up for this right now. Love to see the numbers of people coming out for Black Lives Matter right now. Love to just see this energy that's happening, especially here in New York City, where the energy is so vibrant. So, the activism scene here is just unlike anywhere else, in my opinion. And the people that show up, they bring that energy. They bring that energy to the streets. And that's what I really aim to showcase, right, in my Activist NYC project, is to just really show that energy and show the passion that people have, and really just spread awareness, right, of these issues and why they are important for us to talk about.
In speaking about kind of places and platforms that give voice to this, and really, give us places where we can speak freely as fully, not only documentarians, but also as activists. I think, Lukita, with Sunstroke, that's such a key part of what the zine is about, and what you guys are doing is to really marry and make sure that art and activism and these voices are really front and center. Can you talk a bit about why that was important for you to be a part of something like Sunstroke, and why that sort of completes you, maybe even as an artist? I think it's such a beautiful, completion of even the work that you do on camera. So I'm not surprised that you have this passion for this. So can you talk a bit about that?
I found Sunstroke when I was in high school, and I grew up in a very conservative town, where I was the token Asian in my high school. Mm-hmm. And I never felt like I had a group of people, a group of creatives, or a group of people to relate to in any way. Everybody looked different to me. Everybody spoke differently to me. Everybody had different dreams and goals. And when I found Sunstroke, they were just looking for creatives, and I applied, and I had done like web design work for fun in my bedroom, just like coding in my room, like making pretty websites. And I told them I could do that. And that kind of turned into Sunstroke, after that point, turned into this interdisciplinary arts collective of all of these different voices from all over the world, mainly focusing on Gen Z voices, this Gen Z adolescent coming of age in this time where the world is very tumultuous, and we have this spotlight on what media was and what is, and what we want media to be, and what we want to see, and seeing power in the truth, not from a perspective put on us. And it, like you were so right, it fulfills me absolutely to be able to be a part of facilitating space for underrepresented voices. And even if I am trying to find my own voice right now in my racial identity, I am still wildly passionate about helping create space for those that know what or know how they want to change the world. And I want to help in that way. So that's how Sunstroke fulfills me. Yeah.
I know. I mean, I'm a tiny bit older than you. We're not going to do the math here. It'll take too long. But I don't know. I just think it's freaking amazing that you guys are coming of an age where you can both explore and create space. Like, how powerful is that? Like, when I grew up, I gotta, I mean, I don't know. It's like MASH and Connie Chung. You know what I mean? I was like, it was just such a far away, dream. And so I just think it's amazing, Lukita, and all of you guys, especially this generation, to be able to have the wherewithal to say, like, I'm figuring it out, but I also know that I need to create space for others to be here in this conversation with me. And I don't know, it just gives me so much hope. So thank you for that. Longi, as people are talking, I see your head just like nodding so much in agreement with what everyone has been saying. And you've said with some of your work that you feel that your purpose is to help others see life in a different perspective. And so much of that perspective is connected to how we look at ourselves, right? So I think as a photographer, and that medium is so ripe for metaphors because you're both documenting others, but it's also a bit of, who you are in that work, even though you're hidden from the end result. It's just, I'm not a poet, but it is very poetic. But how do you feel about that sort of giving others a way to see themselves differently, and then how that informs you? I think Lukita talked about it a bit, and we had that. So I was just curious about how that informs you as a creative person.
Yeah, sure. Much of what I said had to do really from taking self-portraits. Often I get clientele that aren't very confident in standing in front of the camera. So there's a lot of comments that are made that indicates that there is some sort of insecurities. And for me, that is an opportunity to bring light, a different perspective to them. And so often these comments are made, and then I take a photo, and during our shoot, it's like you see this drastic change in their confidence and how they perceive themselves. And you get compliments where it's just like, wow, you made me look great, or like, wow, that's me. And it is, you have the power to show people a different side of themselves that they don't often see, because we often like to see ourselves, point out our imperfections, and that usually just kind of takes over sometimes. And so with photography, it's a tool in every aspect of life, from protests to just your personal, to people's personal lives and how they perceive themselves. And so essentially that's what I meant, is kind of just allowing people to self-reflect through photography, through what we're as photographers are able to capture, and to reflect on like their outlook on certain situations. Often what we see on media in these protests and rallies is anger, and it's one of those things where it's like, yes, that may be it, but that is a small segment of what is actually going on within these protests. Majority of what we see, like Cindy said, is you have so many people from different walks of life, people of different colors, different races, different religions, spiritual beliefs. And it's probably one of the most beautiful environments, to be honest, that I decide to partake in on, often. And it's simply crazy to know that all these different people come together and don't see a division. They don't see each other different from one another. And there's nothing but this love and this solidarity that is just so inviting, and it's so unifying, that is the part of protest photography that I love, and that continues to inspire me to keep coming back, so that we can allow people to see the whole picture, but also the details. And that's essentially how I find my purpose through photography. That's what I meant. So
Thank you. That was so beautifully said. Simra, you alluded to this earlier about your interest in sort of, the dream's end, what it means. So it's both the happiness and the joy, and, all of the things that maybe in our culture could be taboo or hidden, or, as you said, toxic. Talk to me about why it's important for you to embrace those two things in your work.
So, kind of in the beginning of my photography journey, like back in high school,
I just, when I was like starting to incorporate identity into my work, I would put my models in kind of like these traditional South Asian wear. And if you've seen our clothes, they're like very in your face, very over the top, dramatic. And so that's what I would put them in. But then as I like continued to do shoots like that, it kind of felt like I was romanticizing my culture a bit, and kind of like tokenizing the models and my culture, and my work. Um, and so since that was also kind of a time where I was young and my mind was more like impressionable, I started to realize like personally in my life, like different issues that were arising, just like the expectations and pressures that are put on Asian women, growing up. And so I started incorporating that into my work because I found that it is important to show the beautiful side of our culture, but at the same time, these are issues we can't ignore. So on one hand, we have these realities and experiences that are like very true to ourselves and that do happen and are important to not just like sweep under the rug, which is a very common thing to do in Asian cultures. But on the other hand, sometimes these realities get to be too much stress on our shoulders and just kind of overtake us that we need an escape. And we need a place to like have these dreams and have these utopias, as I call them. So the utopias that I like to create are kind of like also a moment in time where the model can just have a safe space to kind of just collaborate with me on a shoot that she envisions and we kind of just bring it to life. So it's not just like I'm saying this is a utopia, but it's also like physically in that moment, I want it to be a dream, and a utopia for the model in the current time.
This sense of utopia. I mean, what a amazing word, and also just what an amazing experience for whoever you're shooting. Like, when do we ever get to create a utopia for ourselves? So I think it's fantastic. Already the clock is running. I mean, I didn't even get to 2 questions, I feel like, but I guess I would like to personally ask a final question and hear from all of you guys, because I think that there could be so many young people and young creatives listening to this conversation, and feeling like there is no way that I can do this. There is no way that I in my life right now feel seen enough, heard enough, acknowledged enough to pursue something as creative and as passionately fulfilling as this. I think there is often the Asian stereotype, at least with my background, it was anything creative and outside of like the trinity of doctor, lawyer, engineer was just like such a struggle. And I know that hopefully that is changing so much. But I would love to ask everyone, what is one piece of advice or just a moment that you want to share where they can take that and really lean on that when they feel unseen or unheard? And I'll just go around in order. And Cindy, I'll start with you.
This is something that I could talk a lot about. So I also grew up in like a generation where my parents certainly wanted me to become doctor, lawyer. I actually ended up being a lawyer, so I'm actually a lawyer as well, everyone. But I hated law, and I quit law, and it was this moment, right, where I was really unhappy with what I was doing. I couldn't find a job that I was passionate about. And I had decided that I wanted to quit law and pursue photography. And it was really Activist NYC that propelled me to make that decision. And as Asian Americans, we are still often pressured to fit this mold, this stereotype of becoming a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or these jobs that are quote unquote practical and professional, because that's, our parents came usually from other countries that were very impoverished, and they have this mentality that we are going to be poor and that we can't survive. My mom, I still struggle with this with my mom every day. I talk to her about this all the time. She still thinks I'm poor. She still thinks I'm gonna die one day in like a gutter because she doesn't think I make enough money. And always a constant struggle talking to our parents about this, because like we have to constantly work 10 times harder as well to prove that we're worthy, to prove that we're valuable, not only because of our parents, but because of white supremacy and how white supremacy has pitted us down, has always denied us the opportunities, has always given us, a barrier to succeed, because we constantly struggle with imposter syndrome. I constantly struggle with it as well. And these are all these things that are weighing us down to pursue what we really, really, truly want to pursue, right? And so I'm still dealing with this, but I guess my advice would be to find your passion and to really just do what makes you happy. Because in the end, like law, I made no money in law either. So I was like, I might as well do photography and make no money as well. Just kidding. I'm trying. You know, we're all trying our best. We're all like hustling. Like it's like my mentality was, you know, I'm not happy doing this. Like, why am I wasting my life? Why am I wasting my energy? Why am I just slaving for a white man in an office where I'm never going to be promoted? I'm never going to get anywhere. I may as well do what I feel passionate about, what I really care about. And getting through the imposter syndrome, it's really a matter of, you just have to shut out everyone else and just focus on you, focus on your work. Like, don't care about what other people are doing. It's really hard to do that, because I still do it to this day, and I constantly compare myself to others. But don't compare yourself to others. Don't care about what anyone else is doing. Just focus on what you are doing. And if you are happy with the work that you're producing, and you're happy with the message that you are sharing with the world, then that is what matters most. And then one day, hopefully, someone will recognize it. Someone will recognize your hard work, and they will give you that opportunity. They will, you know, invite you to HBOMax. They will invite you to these spaces to talk and to share your stories, you know. And so I really feel passionate about this. I'm sorry, I'm getting very heated, because I this is a topic I could talk a lot about. But yeah, my advice really is to just really follow what I know it's really cliche, but just really follow what your heart desires.
Yeah. Thank you. Hannah, and for you, how would you answer that question?
I mean, I agree with everything that Cindy said. And also, I think one big thing for me that made like a big difference, or I guess like that kept me in the industry, because there are many times that I was thinking like, do I still want to be a photographer? Especially in the journalism, like the photojournalism space, it's a very like white male dominated space. So it was really hard to enter into the market. But I held on to seeing when I saw one Asian woman doing it, like she was carrying this big 300mm lens. She was working for the Canadian press. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she's doing it. I can do this. And I think that helped me. And then when I broke into like just going to different workshops and finding that one other Asian or like non-white photographer really helped me kind of stay grounded, becoming friends with them, building that network, like what do you call it? Like it's like a horizontal network, not trying to find someone, not like just trying to seek after editors or art directors or other like creative directors. I really focused on networking with my peers. And that's why when we started Authority Collective, you know, it was with all these other women of color. I think that really kept me grounded, and they were the perfect people to be bouncing ideas off of, sharing early project ideas and being like, what do you think? Is anyone going to be open to this? I mean, like, yeah, when I first started a project, this hyphenated project where I was exploring like the Korean diaspora identity, I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to care, but whatever, like I'll just do it. And I think Cindy was right. Eventually someone does notice, you know, when one person notices, slowly other people will start to notice. But having that support network made a huge difference. I think when I first started photography, I think we were told this message of like, oh, you have to do this all by yourself, especially if you're like a freelancer. And there's that lone wolf mentality. But I wouldn't be able to do this without my peers and my friends in the industry. And so I would highly, highly recommend to young people who want to break in is to even find a mentor, a peer that you look up to, a photographer that you think is, you know, doing amazing out there, and just asking questions, meeting them for coffee, and just learning from the people who are already doing it, even if it's 2 or 3 people. I think just having one more person enter into the photo world that isn't like a white dude, I think, you know, makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And even just in our conversation alone, we have platforms and organizations that they can also plug into as well. So that's great. Lakita, what advice do you give to younger folks, peers, you know, and how to create a life that is fulfilling, doing what you want to do? Yeah, because that's hard.
I want to 100% agree with everything that Sydney and Hannah said, but I think the one thing that I is to invest in your perspective, because it's valid at any point in the process. All creativity and artwork helps me with is processing emotion, processing how I'm feeling at different parts in my life. And that's important to invest in that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that it's a process. It's every step of the way. It's right, as creatives, and we're all forging our own paths. There's no like, if you do this, then you move up one, you know, place on the Monopoly board, and you go around and you collect, you know, we're all sort of creating our own paths as we go along. So thank you. Simra, what advice do you have, or a piece of advice that was even given to you to sort of help people realize that this is possible, you know, and that a life filled with creative passions can work, you know?
I graduated university last year, and I feel like I did have like professors that would help me along the way, but none of them were POC, so it kind of didn't feel like a mentorship to me, and I feel like all of my classmates were getting the proper mentorship that they needed, but nobody could really help me with my work. So after I graduated, I kind of just started to reach out to people like other photographers that I saw in the industry that were kind of doing similar work to what I want to be doing. And I just set up phone calls with them and just kind of connected with them, just learn about what they're doing. So I think that definitely helped. And kind of just like this, like talking with other Asian photographers is like very heartwarming and like it makes me very hopeful and excited for the future. And then I would also say to, even if no one's seeing or hearing your work, I think you should still continue to keep producing the work, because the more you give into the world, like the world's going to give you like 10 times more back. So I think that's very important. And eventually, like Hannah and Cindy were saying, somebody's going to see it and acknowledge it. And so, yeah, that would be my advice.
Literally, like all of that. I guess to sum it up, I would say create with intention, because when you create with intention, nobody can tell you different. And I think that just sums up exactly what Lakita was saying too. Is that just with you knowing and creating what you like, what feels good, what's helping you, just translate the certain, whatever emotion you are feeling within your creativeness or creative medium, that you can never go wrong. You can never feel bad about it, no matter what anyone says, because at the end of the day, that is you, and that is what you resonate with, and you can't change the photo. At the point that you've attached a certain emotion to it, you can't change it, you can't take it away. So to create with intention, and what Sydney was saying, just as you involve yourself with community, it just, the world will, things will come around, somebody will see your work and they will see that you're amazing and your perspective is amazing. It's powerful. And I resonate with that in this moment right now. And it's just, do not let people tell you otherwise. Don't pay attention to the Instagram likes. Don't pay attention to the shares. Shoot. Shoot what you want. Shoot what feels good. And shoot what you think other people would appreciate. And if they don't appreciate it now, they will later. So definitely create with intention and stay true to yourself and don't give up. I think often within our cultures, with AAPI, as a Pacific Islander, I don't see anybody doing what I do. As a Pacific Islander woman, I don't see any other Pacific Island women out with their cameras on the streets. So for me to be this person that other Pacific Islander young women can see, and maybe just adult women that could see, I feel honored to be here because I am who I wanted to see years ago. And so I think it's a very honoring moment for all of us to be here and to represent our cultures. Because one day, people that are watching this that are struggling with feeling unseen and unheard, you will be seen one day. And when you are going to feel inspired, and others are going to be inspired by your presence, by seeing you. So create with intention. That is pretty much all I have to say. So,
I mean, Langi, that was just the most beautiful way to end this conversation. Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning into this conversation through our lens, brought to you by HBOMax in celebration of AAPI Heritage Month. Also, a big thank you to AAPI Women Lead, our partners in this. Also, speaking of where we can see everybody's work and where they're amplifying these voices, Sunstroke Magazine will also be featuring all of the work of our photographers today. So check out sunstrokemagazine.com. You can see it there. And of course, to all of you beautiful women, the photographers here today, you guys are our voice. You help us be seen. And I'm so personally, deeply thankful for all the work that you guys do. So thank you for your time and your passion and your intention, Langi. Thank you.